Alright, so the Zombie World deck is really good at one specific thing, and that is countering any deck that relies on monster type. Tri-Brigade, Drytron, other zombie decks, funny enough, actually completely ruins the Edelich if they don't get skill drain, but the point here is that this is what this deck is good at. And of course, these are all some of the decks that people are consistently running, making it a really good anti-meta deck until Despia comes out. And then I really don't know what to tell you guys to do. Maybe just play Despia. But until then, Zombie World is what you need to run through everything. Starting with the titular card Zombie World. As you can see, this card allows you to turn everything from the field to the grave into zombies. This completely cuts Tri-Brigade's ability to link summon from the grave because they're not Winged Beast / Beast Warrior / whatever the hell else those cards are anymore. Now they're zombies. Trying to use a Drytron ritual spell? Well, I hope you have more Drytron cards in your hand because everything on the field is now zombies. And the reason it counters that, which I'll get into in a second. And by a second, I mean right now, because that card is Doom King, whatever the fuck that second word is. Right? So, two things great about this card. Actually, there's like 5, but I'm going to say 2. First off, is the ability to continuously recycle itself at the beginning of every standby phase, so long as there is a field spell. Secondly, it is the ability to, once per chain, either negate an effect of a zombie monster, or upon the activation of a zombie monster's effect, banish a card on the field or the grave. And this is the reason that it completely ruins Edelich so long as they haven't played Skill Drain. Because as soon as Edelich activates itself, you just banish it, and then they will very quickly run out of cards. And I mean, look, they only got 3 copies of them, you know. They're gonna run out fairly quickly, as long as Doom King is on the board. Now, this consistent negate is only one of the reasons that this deck is really, really strong. Second reason is the absolute consistency of the ability to get Zombie World onto the board. You got Necro World Banshee, which can just banish itself as a quick effect, mind you, and that's a big part of the benefit. Banish itself from the field or the grave, and it instantly plays Zombie World for you. This is the reason I run 2 copies. Because 1, that card is expensive, and 2, I could just run 3 Banshees and get Zombie World rather easily anyway. On top of that, Edelich itself, you know, is also a very strong recyclable card that, you know, between his hand effect to remove cards from the board and its ability to, special summon a zombie from the hand and make it immune to being destroyed by card effects for the turn, like it, has its uses. Those are doubled by all of their trap cards, which, the 2 continuous cards being able to either, 1, banish a card from the grave, or 2, just destroy one, in the case of Conquistador, so long as you have Edelich on the board. I mean, they're really good cards, and they will recycle themselves into the 2 Elixir cards, right? Which, of course, they can summon either Edelich itself, assuming it's not on the board, or any of your zombie monsters that you have in the deck / graveyard, which, another great way to get Doom King, right? And then they'll recycle themselves back to the continuous trap cards afterward, and then the deck is a continuous loop of summoning Edelich and Doom King, turn after turn, until your opponent has just run out of options. Other things that are great because of Zombie World's existence are Super Poly, because you have the options of A, the Edelich fusion, which is really good for stealing other people's cards on loop, and 2, Dragon Necro, which is just a good Super Poly fodder. It actually isn't that amazing of a card on its own. I mean, what it does is good, turning, assuming that there's, say, a monster that can't be destroyed by battle. Well, you attack it, and now it has 0 attack, and now you have a token with that card's attack. So it's capable of doing a lot of damage in that regard. And also the token is, also more fusion fodder for Edelich if you really need it. Odds are you won't. I've yet to be in a situation where I've made a fusion summon with the token, but that's because if I have Super Poly or this, the Edelich fusion card, I'm typically going for Golden Lord. The only time you aren't going to play Golden Lord is if you just don't have Edelich on the board, and then you go for Dragon Necro. And if Zombie World isn't on the board to go for Dragon Necro, then you go for Mud Dragon, very good Super Poly fodder. There's also, which I don't have in the deck, Starving Venom Dragon. I'm pretty sure everyone's been hit by that at least once in their life. Maybe not so much in Master Duel, because I've seen very few users of Super Poly. But it is always an option. Speaking of Super Poly, there's also World Chalice Guard Dragon. A very fun one for link-heavy decks. Mostly because no one is ready to get hit by this card, because most people don't know the card exists. I mean, 3 link monsters, it's seemingly a lot. Until someone plays something like Access Code Talker, and then, decks that actually use a large variety of link monsters can very easily be hit by this card and caught off guard. I've only ever summoned it once. But the fact that the option is there is always really good. And that's Super Poly, right? That's the reason for Super Poly. Now, to get into some of the deeper cards as to what causes the deck to function. Glow Up Bloom. Goes to the grave. You either add a level 5 or higher zombie monster to the hand, or in the event Zombie World is on the board, you get to special summon it. Now, you have a lot of ways to send this to the grave, right? There's Uni Zombie in the event the card is still in the deck. Or if it's in your hand and you just have Uni Zombie on the board, it's a good way to get rid of it. Especially because Ash Blossom can't counter it if you discard it from the hand, but it will definitely counter it if you try to get rid of it from the deck. The point is, however, it's a very good way to get Glow Up Bloom into the grave. The other way, you play Glow Up Bloom, you go for Linkaribo. It's always a good card to have on the board. Glow Up Bloom activates, you got your Edelich in hand, or you got your Doom King special summoned. I'm going to get into the combos later, so I can't really explain those now. I have so many flowcharts to make. Anyway, next card. Yes, Uni Zombie. You increase the card's level by discarding a zombie monster, and also by sending one from the deck to the grave. You get both of those options per turn. So the level increase part is primarily negligible. Because even though, in my version of the deck, I'm running Red Eye Zombie Necro Dragon, and this Mayakashi card, both of them are realistically useless almost. They're just options. You could run this deck without having either of these two cards, and you'd be fine. I've actually only summoned this maybe 2 times. I've summoned Red Eye Zombie Necro Dragons a whole 0 times. But they're there. They're there just in case you get an opportunity to use Uni Zombies, you know, being a usefulness of being a tuner monster, right? But the advantage of this being a tuner monster is Solitaire. Because Solitaire has the ability to just special summon it straight from the deck. It can also summon Glow Up Bloom, but 100% of the time, if you have Solitaire as an option on board, you're gonna go for Uni Zombie. Because Uni Zombie is going to continually perpetuate the ability to send cards to the grave from your own deck, which will 9 times out of 10 be Glow Up Bloom anyway, unless you have Banshee in the deck because you don't have Zombie World on board yet. Again, we'll get into combos later. Gozuki, just another way to send a card from the deck to the graveyard. The secondary effect to banish a zombie from your grave to summon Gozuki is incredibly negligible because every other zombie monster you have is gonna banish itself or resummon itself for its own effect, so you can't really afford to special summon Gozuki again. More often than not, you don't even need to. Alright, so, moving on from there. Right, a quick go into Rivalry. The fun part about Rivalry with Zombie World is that because everything on the board will then be a zombie monster, you can't summon any other cards, because cards in your hand are still, whatever their original type was. Cards in the extra deck are still their original type. So as long as they're anything but anything but zombies, they can't be played. Because you already have what is considered now a zombie monster on the board. So it's just straight up impossible for them to summon additional cards unless they're special summoning something from the grave, since cards in the grave are also zombies. And that's why Rivalry is in this deck. I don't fully understand why the Edelich deck runs Rivalry, because Rivalry doesn't... the Edelich deck does not run Zombie World. So they're running on the idea of, maybe your deck has multiple card types. This just completely locks you out of playing cards to begin with. There's not much you can do anyway, once that's on the board. Now, as for the extra deck, as I said, Super Polyfodder, Super Polyfodder, Super Polyfodder, also Super Polyfodder, but actually a very good card. Its ability to tribute a monster to take control of an opponent's monster is really good, because it's not one of those until the end of the turn effects. No, it can just straight take the card. The only limitation being that it can't attack or activate its effects. But that's really not that bad when you consider what it can do. Right? Red Eye Zombie Necro Dragon. Honestly, again, you will probably never actually play this card. The Mayakashi, you'll probably never play this card. If you do, even if you do, its effect is like Link monster based. It's not gonna happen. It's just not. Don't think about it. Linkaribo, only playable if you have Glow Up Bloom in hand, and that just so happens to be like your only play. There are a lot of times where this might somehow happen if you just have really bad luck. And I won't even say necessarily bad luck, because you could get a hand with Glow Up Bloom being your only monster, and then nothing but spell and traps, and you can still do a lot with the spell and traps in the upcoming turns, But the only monster you're going to get on the board that turn, unless one of those spell and traps with Zombie World, is going to be Glow Up Bloom into Linkuriboh. And then you add a card to your hand. But again, combos later on. Nightmare Phoenix. An emergency spell and trap removal. Because it's there just in case you end up needing it. Vampire Sucker, also a card that's just kind of there if you need it, because the effect of special summoning a card from your opponent's grave just to draw one, it's not really that powerful, right? Now, it's the fact that you would draw a card just for special summoning a zombie at any point. The problem is this deck has much better combos for use that you would never really play Vampire Sucker, and it's really just there for emergencies. Again, special summoning a monster from your opponent's grave is rarely usable, and it's mostly, in my eyes, for the emergency draw. But maybe someone knows a better use for that than I do. Then there's the other effect of being able to tribute your opponent's zombie monsters. But it's not often that you'd be normal summoning Edelich or Doom King. So that effect is also kinda negligible. But again, I hold this card in the deck for emergencies. If you want to get rid of it, by all means, go right ahead. It hurts absolutely nothing. Avendread Savior is here for one reason. Sending a card from the deck to the graveyard. Let's say you have two cards, and somehow both of them are useless. Or maybe those two cards would be the continuous traps, or a continuous trap and Glow Up Bloom, right? Or maybe even Uni Zombie, since Uni Zombie doesn't hold much use after its effect goes off. You can summon Avendread, attack, and you get to send another card from the grave to lower the opponent's monster's attack for that turn. It's pretty good. I haven't used it yet, but I know that it definitely has a genuine use that is pretty good. Now, the Vendread card from the grave part, I don't have any other Vendread cards in the deck. You might think of a combo better than what I have and end up drafting one, and then that effect will be useful to you. That's up to you. I personally didn't feel the need for it. Anaconda, it's just for Super Poly. It is really just for the emergency Super Poly. Like, if you have no other roads to go down, everything has been countered, but you can still get Anaconda out and Super Poly, obviously you're going to go for it. Now, this would be a better card with Starving Venom Dragon, which I just don't have in the deck. You know what, I'm actually going to do this right now while I'm talking about it. And fuck it, I'll get rid of one of the Dragon Necros because I don't personally feel I need to anymore, because I rarely ever play the one. But yeah, that's what Anaconda's for. It's just for Super Poly. It's that emergency Super Poly effect. The Absolute Zero Mayakashi. This is not a card you get to play often, but its ability to negate all banished monsters effect is pretty good. I can't think of the top of my head the decks that this most affects. It messes with Virtual World a little bit. Oh man, I really can't remember what that other deck is, where like all of their cards activate when they're banished. if I remember, I'll like come back and talk about it. But it's a really good effect. That on its own. Then the ability to, if anything's activated in the graveyard or monsters activated in the graveyard, you can negate the effect of something on the board twice. It's just really strong. Like, you won't often get this card out because the whole 2+ zombie monster thing, like, more often than not, if you have that many cards on the board, you're going to kill your opponent. But if you do end up playing the card, it definitely has very good uses for being, a continuous lockout. Even more so than your deck normally would be. You already have Doom King on the board to negate or banish a card. You might have Rivalry out just to prevent them from playing cards. Their cards have already become zombies because of Zombie World, so certain effects don't work anymore anyway. This deck has a lot of lockout variables. And it's funny because the deck's purpose isn't necessarily locking your opponent out. It just has the power to do that. Then, lastly, I have drafted Underworld Goddess because I felt that if there's ever a time I need to take over an opponent's card, just like something that can't be destroyed or can't be targeted, and I really need to get that card off the board. Again, 4+ effect monsters, it's not easy to necessarily play this card. But if you can get it off, this could potentially save an entire duel, removing a certain card off the board. Especially if it's a link monster, which just makes summoning this so much easier. And it's the fact that you summon it, negates all face-up monsters on the board, right? Great effect. Unaffected by activated effects that unaffected by effects that don't specifically target the card. Also, really good. So, like, none of the mirror forces are going to do anything to it. Torrential Tribute won't do anything. There are a lot of cards that people run that are not going to be able to touch this card. And then the ability to negate a card being special summoned from the grave, which is just a second Mayakashi almost in that regard. But again, it's the power to pull one of your opponent's cards out as fodder for its summon that I feel makes it really good. Now, as far as cards that are not in the deck that you might want to draft, Nibiru, obvious reasons. Infinite Impertinence, obvious reasons. Hand Trap, again, same thing. This is like Ash Blossom, except it isn't. So this mostly affects, cards coming from the graveyard. It definitely has a lot of good uses. Arch Nemesis Protos. It's just a really good negate. The issue is it's a little bit inconsistent to get out in this deck because most of these cards are dark. I mean, Maxi is an earth. This is fire. Ash Blossom's fire. Gozuki is earth. Strangely enough, is weird for an earth zombie monster in my eyes. Which is light. So, it's definitely possible to get it. The other big problem is you have to banish those monsters. So if you only have, Doom King in the grave, and you end up banishing your Doom King, or you banish your Eldritch, it can definitely really hurt your combos afterward. But if you can get this card on the board and they're running one type of thing, you stop them from playing light monsters, that can give you a whole free turn to use. So it's something that if you really feel the need for, you can run it. The strictly Eldritch deck runs this because one, I mean, free 2,000 damage is good. Or this, if you want to, just prevent a card from being affected by card effects. It's definitely an option if you can, manage to get 2 Edelich on board, which isn't really that hard. So both of these cards are viable options to fill in here, Apollosa, obvious reasons. The issue is, again, the bigger Link monsters are not the easiest to summon because this deck does not produce a lot of the biggest of boards. Again, luckily Doom King, Edelich, they can recycle themselves. So using them for a Link summon isn't the worst when you can get them back the very next turn. But it's still not going to be something you always have the option to do. And then Super Dreadnought, which is useless if you don't have regular Dreadnought. So it does suck to have to draft both of these cards to make full use out of it. But it's a strong card. This version, this one is mostly an OTK machine, but surprisingly enough, this deck is really good at OTKs on its own without it. So with the bulk of the deck breakdown down, I will now begin showcasing flowcharts for combos. Okay, so 3 things I didn't know. One is that finding a good flowchart generating website for free is stupid fucking difficult. So this is really shitty quality. But anyway, this is about the basic flowchart for what to do based on the cards in your opening hand. And then so as you can see, Glow Bloom. It is Glow Bloom in hand. If that's somehow the only card in your hand that you can summon, it's always going to do the same thing. You're always going to go to summon Link or Evo, right? Yes, Zombie World on the board, you're summoning Doom King. And, whether that be the Zombie World started in your hand, or you had Foolish Burial to send Banshee into the grave in order to get it. Regardless of what method you had of getting Zombie World on the board, that is always going to be your immediate go-to. The only time I would say not to go for Doom King is if your hand is absolutely full of the continuous Eldritch traps, in which case getting Eldritch might not be the worst outcome, because you'll be able to destroy your card, banish a card. I would say this is very matchup dependent. If you have an idea of what your opponent is running somehow, then make that call based on that, but 9 times out of 10, if you can summon Doom King, you're going to do it. Otherwise, you just add Eldritch to hand, and that's pretty much your turn from there, after, you set whatever it is you're going to set and all that. Solitaire, always going to go into Uni Zombie. Every single time you're going into Uni Zombie, because Uni Zombie is how you're going to get, all your necessary cards into the grave, with this here being the prioritization for what you should be sending to the grave with Uni Zombie's effect. Ghost Key is essentially the exact same thing. The only difference between Ghost Key and Uni Zombie is that Uni Zombie can get rid of cards in your hand, which is why it's always the go-to when you can summon it. because, you know, getting rid of a card from your hand and your deck is the fastest way to get your combos down. And then there was another card. In the event you ever have just Banshee in hand, you're just gonna play it and then just hold it on the board until like something were to try targeting it or something, and then you activate the effect. You know, play Zombie World, and you know, you go from there. Like, maybe you're not gonna have a very good turn if somehow Banshee is like the only monster in your hand, but despite having 3 of them, I've yet to see this happen very often. And then if you have no monsters in your hand somehow, and you know, you don't have Foolish Burial, and you at least have, you know, Cursed Outland, then, you know, you follow this here. This right here is is your go-to for that card. Other than that, like, if you have any other cards, I mean, the majority of them are spell and traps or monsters you can't play, so there's not a whole lot of option. But surprisingly enough, this is way more consistent than you thought. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna switch back in a second, and I'm gonna show some, like, a few examples of opening hands and like what you'd actually actively be looking for when you have those hands. Alright, so here we are back at the deck itself, and we're gonna go and where's the button? Look at, yes, here we go. So sample 5. So let's say this is your hand, right? This is not that bad of a hand. It's actually really good. You play Zombie World. You play Uni Zombie. Uni Zombie gets rid of Glow Bloom from hand. Glow Bloom going to the grave allows you to play Doom King. Now you have 2 options when sending a card from the deck to the grave. You could A, send Eldritch to the grave and use one of the Scarlet Sanguines to special summon it, which would then allow you to get one of the continuous traps on the board. Or, if you are afraid of spell and trap removal, you could send Banshee to the grave. This way, if they get rid of Zombie World the first time, you just play it again. Sample draw again. Alright, you got your hand trap, you got everything. So, Solitaire into Uni Zombie. Uni Zombie sends Doom King from the hand to the grave. Uni Zombie sends Banshee from the deck to the grave. Play Zombie World. Next standby phase, not only do you get Doom King back, but you activate Rivalry. Now they can't really play cards. Again, it's weak to spell and trap removal under this scenario, but what can you really do? Not much. I don't feel that drafting Field Barrier is actually really worth it. Oh no, actually, I'm sorry. There's an alternative to what I was just saying. All right, this a hand like this, if you are going first turn, is kind of bad. I would say you play Gozuki, you send a Banshee to the grave. Now you at least have Zombie World on board, and you could set 1 or 2 of these. It really doesn't matter. The more you set, the more inclined your opponent will be to try to, like, throw Harpies or Lightning Storm into it. Because Gozuki on its own is very non-threatening, so clearly they're not going to try to Lightning Storm your Gozuki out. So that's really not the best hand. This. Yeah, you're going to add one of your trap cards to your hand. You're going to Glow Up Bloom into Linkuriboh into... yeah, I guess I would add Outlich in this scenario as well. Then... this is also something of a brick. At the very least, you have... Rival... Actually, no. If you were to use Glow Up Bloom to add Doom King, fusion summon the Mad Lord. Now you have a card that can't be destroyed. Worst case scenario, its effects get negated, or it gets added to the hand, or it gets attributed. But I don't see a whole lot of kaijus anymore, so you might be able to avoid the attributed part. So all you have to fear is it getting controlled. In the case of like a Sky Striker deck, or return to the hand. Those are your biggest fears with the Mad Lord first turn. But it would be your best go-to with this scenario here. This, same thing, Solitaire into, Solitaire into Uni Zombie, discard Glow Up Bloom. You go from there. Same thing. You see that there's very few initial combos you have to worry about. What it really comes down to, the biggest decision making is like, okay, what card do you banish with Hakera? What do you super poly? What cards do you throw out to try to bait somebody into using their Ash Blossom? Like, these are the biggest thoughts that really run through your, oh god, imagine this hand. Imagine this hand. You might want to surrender. I mean, Maxi might, let's pretend, Super Poly. Yeah, you might want to surrender if you somehow ever started with 4 hand traps. Let's not think about that. But yeah, no. The biggest thoughts about this deck are what you use to bait an opponent. Because 9 times out of 10, you see the simple combos. You play Zombie World, you're playing Banshee. Zombie World can't be destroyed. If it somehow does, which would require destroying Banshee and then Zombie World, you banish Banshee, you get your other Zombie World back. You have your Eldritch, you have your Super Poly, your Ash Blossom. Well, actually, in this scenario, you'd keep Banshee in hand for Super Poly, because you don't want to discard Ash Blossom for Super Poly, and you want to keep this on the board. But you get what I mean. Like, it's not a very thought-intensive deck. It's the decisions after your combo gets off that you have to think about. Another example of what you really have to consider is when you have Doom King. Like, what do you negate? What do you banish? Because you have to keep in mind that certain cards activate in the grave. Of course, if you banish the card, you don't have to negate it. But other times you'll think, oh, look at this deck. I know that there's something bigger I have to get rid of. So you'll maybe negate the card in the grave and then banish the card on the board when its effect activates. These are the biggest thoughts that will run through your head. In terms of decision making when playing this deck. The combos are very simple. Very often you will get your cards, you'll run with what's available, and you'll just make your play based off that. Like it's not. And if you look at the channel, you look at the videos that I'll throw up, that I don't like. Here, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, so this makes sense. Like, look, this deck got me to Plat 1. So just keep that in mind. But what I wanted to show is that, look at this. Yeah, 217 duels in total. Wait, no, I'm sorry. 174 duels standard duels here. And 139 of them won. That is, as a percent. It is a 79% win rate overall, right? And of course, not all of these decks were played with the Zombie World deck, but the vast majority of them have been. Because I strayed away after a few Thunder Dragon and Virtual World inconsistencies. So realistically, this deck is proven that it does win the vast majority of the games that I get into. I don't... I might only post wins, but it's not to say that I'm here, ignoring my losses. No, you go, yeah, where is it? You go, you look at the match history. These are all a lot of wins. I mean, I did have this very strange loss streak here. Shit was just going really bad for me at that phase. But it's definitely a deck that wins a lot of games. It's a consistent deck. If it can get me to Plat 1, it can get anyone to Plat 1. So, there you go. This is a non-scripted recording of how to play the Zombie World deck. I hope this helps. If you have questions, I'm around. I answer back. I'm gonna start streaming again soon. When I start streaming again, you could show up there. You can ask me questions there too. I'll answer. I got you. Now that I'm in Plat 1, I'm gonna start running more casual duels, which means I'm gonna start making my fun decks again. I'll probably run Marincess when their support comes out, because the new Marincess cards that aren't in the game yet are really, really helpful. Really good spells from Marincess come out. I can't run pure Simorg because I'm afraid that when the ban list hits that, the CCG ban list already banned the Simorg Link monster. I want the Simorg Link to be banned in Master Duel, but it kills my ability to play pure Simorg. I don't like that. Okay, but regardless, video's over. I sure as fuck hope this worked. I am not going back to listen to the sound of my own voice to make sure that this video worked. Speaking of which, the final little tidbit I'm going to throw out. Did you know that the reason your voice doesn't sound the same in recordings as it does when you're speaking is because when you hear your own voice, the sound from you speaking goes through your skull, apparently, and this echo that it creates for you causes your voice to sound a lot deeper than it sounds to other people, because they don't hear, your voice doesn't go through their actual skull. It just goes through their ears. For you, the person speaking is different. So your voice will always realistically sound worse than you think it does. And that's why I will never check the recording of this video to see how it sounds, because I cannot deal with how my voice actually sounds. It's fucking awful. Honestly, if anyone has somehow watched the video this far, I am shocked, but I thank you. So, I'm gonna go post this.